Hello, Quack and Smite League, and welcome to another episode of the podcast. Tonight we have a star-studded crew to go over last week games and to cover the final regular season week. Of course, we do have a buffer week for reschedules to be played, but this next week will be the final unique games, not rescheduled. It is an exciting time, and the people who are here with me today is, as always, the lovely Red Sniper 23. And today we have a special guest, another member from the Zeus Juice org, Justen.
Hi.
Another mid laner at that.
Ugh, mid laners. Ugh.
It's good to be here, no matter what you believe about mid laners.
Yeah, first we had Lynn for the win, and now we have Justen. It's a great time for sure, boys. So we got lots of stuff for you tonight. Of course, you know, we have the good games in review from the previous week, and then we will go ahead and give some of our predictions for week number 7. And then once again, we will revisit the playoff issue as a couple things have shaked out one way or another. A few teams have clinched their playoff positions. Well, not necessarily the seeding, but they will be in the battle for the ring. And other teams have also been eliminated. So there is certainly a lot to say as we reach into the first game in review, Reapers versus the Phantoms. As this was my org's match, I will hand it off to Red to begin.
Oh boy, how do we start with this one? Okay, so Reapers and Pittsburgh Phantoms. This was kind of that game that, like, even when I did predictions on this one, you know, looking back at what we had, I had 2-0 to the Phantoms, and I didn't think it was going to be a lopsided 2-0. I mean, even we had the wonderful Lynn on last week, and she even said, yeah, you know, it's probably Phantoms, but it's more like 2-1 because the Reapers are still very strong. Their team presence is still very good. They have talent. And I thought that it would be a close 2-0 rather than just like a blowout 2-0. But this one, you kind of saw the Phantoms do what the Phantoms do best, which is that slow, methodical, like, you know, the boulder coming from the top of the hill, and by the time you see it, it's already on top of you and you can't stop it. The Phantoms really never, in my opinion, never really blew out the Reapers. But at the same time, how do I put it? The Reapers kind of looked a little discombobulated as well. And maybe that was just me. You know, maybe I was looking at things a little wrong, but it never really looked like they were comfortable in that game. Like, there were good battles. I mean, I'm not going to say that there weren't good battles, but like even the ganks, even some of the timings, some things they kind of made you scratch your head a little bit and go, you know, but the Phantoms just looked solid. I mean, they looked like what they are, which is a very highly rated playoff team right now. So, I mean, the Reapers and the Phantoms are kind of that dividing line just in my mind. Like, you have the top 3 that you know are going to be battling it out and are like contenders, and then you have the playoff teams, and then you kind of have the people that are like maybe on the bubble. And the Reapers and the Phantoms, like the Phantoms I would put in that top 3, the Reapers are like right on that cusp where they need to learn how to deal with that top 3, and once they learn how to do that, I think they could be part of that top 3, top 4 vying for the title. But, you know, that's why we have playoffs, because you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I would have to concur over there with Red, just because I watched that set and I was kind of like, I made a joke about I would live tweet the sets from remaining, and I was just kind of typing in general chat my thoughts as I was watching it. And I was really actually impressed by the Reapers. I thought the Phantoms would come in, find a pretty quick 2-0 victory. They were able to manage to get the 2-0, but they weren't quick by any means, although the game time was too exaggerated. It's just the way the Reapers played, given all love to them, they really have surprised me this season. And I think Annoy did an excellent job, especially in that game one on the Susanoo. I just thought
Mhm.
there's a couple issues wrong with the Reapers that I think one of the things that they could really work on is just a bit of drafting. And everyone has draft issues as well, but I think that's something that kind of held them back a bit in that set. As I was watching it, it just seemed like there wasn't much they could do just into the Phantoms draft. And then also another thing, I don't know who's doing the shot calling for that team, but I think the uh, the Phantoms are all pretty sure of whoever's making calls, it seems, and when that call is made, they follow that call. Whereas sometimes I think the Reapers tend to look a little bit split, like they don't know quite who to listen to in those comms. So I think if they can really find that leader and find that shot caller in the team, whether that be Annoy, whether that be really whoever it wants to be, I think Annoy would be a great candidate for that. I think if the Reapers could really, really make someone frustrated coming towards these playoffs.
I tend to agree. Um my opinion of this is it's less the Reaper's fault. I don't really think you can fault them for it. The Phantoms did have a couple bad drafts in that too. The Bakasura was kind of
A bit
an
questionable.
interesting pick. An interesting pick, we'll say that. But I mean, Justen hit it right on the nose there. They're all very confident when Gamer is making calls, and that's who the shot caller is for that team. Gamer, he he was playing so well in that set. In other sets, the difference has been him trolling the calls and them just losing because of that. What comes to mind is that set against Phenoms where they were almost able to get that game 3 there and win. Um, but since then, Gamer's really tied together. Stages has really shown up and supported the rest of his team. I believe that set the people on the cast gave Gamer the MVP because, like, even though of course Stages was playing well, Gamer as well as Mark were just able to protect Stages so much and make sure that he's able to survive. Huge credit to the front line, but also huge credit to just the biggest freaking brain that gamer brought out for that game. I don't know where it's been, but if that's how they're gonna play, uh, Phantoms I think are a very very strong squad. And if they're like that, if you're the Reapers, you just have to say, well, that's just a hard team to just show up against you. But we will move on, of course, to the next set, the Archon Dragons versus the Zeus Juice. And we do have a man on the ground for that game. So why don't you give us some of your thoughts there, Justen, about this 2-0 victory for the Archon Dragons?
Well, the Archon Dragons are a very interesting team. I know there's a lot of storylines and stuff, especially amongst the casting team as I'm a part of as well now. And it's really, we haven't seen what this team is capable of, but another question I don't see mentioned often. We know what these players are capable of, so we know what Alea is going to bring on a nightly basis. We know NMR already. Villain has really made a quick name for himself as being a really good high-level support player as well. So I didn't really expect anything less out of them. I thought there was a matchup that we were pretty comfortable in and something that we could definitely win if we just played properly. And for the most part, we definitely made it tough on them, but we just couldn't quite find the results that we were looking for. And so it sucks, but it's okay. Everything is just for fun here. We'll just learn and getting better. And uh, I think a lot of people going into that matchup probably would have thought a Leia diff here in the mid lane, and a more diff here in the jungle, and just a bunch of diffs coming out all over the board for us. And I think we really showed that we're a pretty resilient team, especially throughout the early game, and could really compete as well with these top end teams.
Red.
Oh boy, how do I go into this one? Are out of nowhere. No, I'm just kidding. I was kind of surprised that we knew NMR was going to come in. This was his first game with the team. We didn't know how well he was going to mesh. We didn't know exactly what dynamic he was going to bring, but he knew that he was a talented player. Now, that being said, how do you deal with NMR and Olhea? And, You're
Yeah.
there's a lot of firepower, and going even in lane, giving yourself a fighting chance, which I think you guys did that night, um, speaks volumes to what, as you called it, resiliency that you guys had. Now, as the games were going on, you could tell that the fatigue was real, um, because you saw, like, when the game was fresh, when the game was new, um, there was engagements, there were fights, there were uh, little things here and there that you were trying to gain an advantages. Um, but as the game went on, there were small mental errors that the Archon Dragons just jumped on, and NMR in particular jumped on, where there would be there'd be a base push, you guys would defend, and then you'd split up into, one person would go one lane, two people would go into a jungle, and then two people would go into another lane, and you'd push out a little far, you never had ward coverage, and then boom, NMR jumps on you and 2v1s you. Or, you would invade the jungle and you're looking for that one extra camp, and that one extra camp just happened to be right as they're respawning and they're right there in front of your face. And it's always dangerous to try and push advantages when you get them. And I feel like we're starting to see the level of play elevated in the majors so much that you really have to be measured as to what type of advantage you're willing to push. And having those timers in the back of your head going, okay, I know he's dead for a minute or two, or, I know he's dead for about 45 seconds. I got to start that timer. Or I know he's dead for, 40 seconds. I got to start that timer. Okay, we just finished this team fight, but I know the jungler and the mid are about to come up. So let's push this and this, because I know they're probably going to look in this direction. And those kinds of mind games are starting to come out in the majors, whereas last season, I should say, it was much more about who could demonstrate the skill in a particular way on a particular night. Whereas in season 3, it's not just the particular skills, because I think the skill gap is much narrower between the highest and the lowest in the majors. But I would also say that the mental game is really stepped up in season 3. And because of the pressure of you only get to face everybody once before the playoffs, you know that every game has that much more of an impact. And Zeus Juice, even sitting in 5th place right now, went toe-to-toe with who I consider a couple of the absolute bangers in the league in Ulhea and NMR. And, I mean, for the first 10, 15 minutes of game 2, I know, especially, you guys hung with them and did so well. It wasn't until a couple of team fights later and a couple of objectives later where you're like, oh, that heartbreak kind of hit. But yeah, it was still such a good set to watch. You guys fought tooth and nail, and you should still hold your head high, after that one.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you, especially just because I think the skill gap, I can't really attest for week for last season, but especially just in that set in particular, and then other sets, I think you could really lump like the Dragons, the Phantoms, Reapers, us, and then maybe one other team in there around that skill level. A lot of errors came down to, like, in game 2, I honestly believe we win the game if we just pushed out the minion wave, and then it doesn't even come down to a Janice snipe from base to still fire giant. It doesn't come down to these fights on phoenixes and stuff for us, you know. And then also the same thing in game 1, just like a botched engagement after we got EFG rapid dies really early, and just little things like that we could fix. And I think that makes a testament to all these teams around that. Like, yes, the number 1 and number 2 seed are pretty set as long as they take care of business and do their jobs, but who do they really want to face in these first rounds, you know, just because you never know. you never know who's gonna show up. I know for a fact I showed up in that dragon set, so I don't know if you want to deal with teams like the Dragons, deal with teams like us, or even Phantoms and Reapers if we get really hot on a particular day.
Yeah. I think this is probably one of my favorite sets of this season. Just because it was so fun to watch. There were so many storylines, as Justin said. NMR coming back and things of that sort. Wondering how he's gonna play. And by the way, that man went full attack speed both games. So interesting choice. He did the exact same build. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Both games. So Berserker Shield, all that. It was very fun to watch. But honestly though, like both teams, they had equal share in blame in terms of making mistakes. As you had mentioned there, like maybe Olive being in a place where he shouldn't have been. But I think the Dragons made a fair amount of their own. And it just ended up becoming a very, very fun set to watch, in my opinion. So, out of that set, I think it's definitely one. If you haven't watched, you should, just because even though it's a 2-0, both games had a lot of close moments,
Yeah.
and um, this Archon Dragons team, no one, it's a question mark, right? Their really only game played before this was the game against the Phantoms where they lost, and that was before NMR was on that team. So there are certainly lots of factors here to play in as they are going to struggle to finish out their season with all the replays or reschedules they have to deal with. So still very interesting, and Zeus Juice is very much in the battle whenever we start thinking about playoff implications. So definitely a set that you should go back and watch. It could very well play a part of the story as we reach to the final parts of this season. And so we come to the final Majors matchup, as Obsidian Mages versus Phenoms was not played. Booney Gang versus the Kings Dukes. And I'm gonna kind of reach into the bag here and say this is sort of what most of us would have expected. Kings Dukes coming off of strong victory in their rescheduled game against Phenoms, 2-0ing them, which is something we could talk about because it technically, I guess, was in this week, which is something I'd probably rather talk about over this game because there's not much to say in terms of the storylines. Booney Gang is still struggling to really find offense, which is what happened in that set. They just really couldn't put out much numbers, and Subkiller wasn't really able to carry a game from solo lane. That's especially hard to do whenever Sandman is there. So they just weren't able to really have any offense against that, especially in game two against that squad, and just everything fell into place as you would sort of expect. Sandman also met Aphrodite solo lane game two, if I recall. So interesting time. I'll let you guys give brief moments about this set before we should probably mention the Kings Dukes versus Phenoms.
Yeah. It's just it was a tough set for the Booney Gang as well. They just had a lot of struggles all year. They did make a pretty good acquisition in my eyes, and I think if we got to see them like replay the teams like the Reapers, replay teams like even us or the Mages from early, even though I think they ended up beating Mages, but Mages has a completely new roster as well. I think it could be a very interesting time. They did go with a couple like role swaps, as important to note. You got Drunk going into the jungle role, Destiny playing mid lane. And it just seemed like you have a team in the Kings Dukes who have kind of fully actualized themselves and they know their roles, they know what they're doing, they have their drafts down, they know the meta. And a team like the Booney Gangs who are still trying to get used to each other, having a couple swaps in their roster specified coming in as well. So um, it's just unfortunate for the Dukes, and I think you're well, not Dukes, but for the Booney Gang, and exactly what you think. I think just the Dukes came in and took care of business. A lot of kills overall, so it was a fun set to watch. But the whole time you knew, even though Booney Gang are getting kills, it's really was just all in the Dukes' favor the whole time.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean the real big matchup was Subkiller against Sandman in the solo lane. And I was expecting a slugfest, and it's kind of what we got, but it was maybe not as eventful as I wanted. Um, I was expecting, they would, take Soul Lane slapping to a new level, and you saw what I thought was very much more conservative play out of Sandman, knowing that Subkiller is dangerous, and Subkiller tends to be the win condition for Boonie Boys. And so when they're no longer Boonie Gang, sorry, not Boonie Boys, the majors, not the minors, but Subkiller tends to be the win condition for the Boonie Gang. And if he is not able to become that win condition later on in the game, then they're kind of stuck. And Sandman never let him really get out to the lead that he needed. And I mean, the King's Dukes just do what they always do best. And they just started rolling. And, the objective secure was there. The team fight prowess was there. I mean, it was one of those games where you kind of go, it sucks that we're expecting this to win, and that's kind of how it went. But at the same time, it's like, well, there's a reason why we have favorites and we have underdogs, and the King's Court Dukes were definitely not the underdogs in that one. Drew's Food, I thought, played pretty stinking well. And anytime when you've got Clay City as your ADC, you always know you're in for a hard night. And that's exactly what it was. It was a hard night for Boonie Gang.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. And so, with that said, we will move on to another Kings Dukes game, the rematch, since we are missing that Obsidian Mages game. So Kings Dukes versus Phenoms goes in the favor of Kings Dukes 2-0, and my God, Justen was there casting. I was on the camera for that set, and that was something to watch. That is definitely all season long. It's not the closest, as me and Justin talked about. I believe Archon Dragons versus Zeus Juice was probably the closest set so far this season. But Kings Dukes versus the Phenoms was one of the the plays were so good. It was quite a sight to see. I'm not going to sit here and say this is like SOC, SEC, or anything like that. You can't really compare the two, amateur smite to that stuff. But there were so many good plays being made on either side. Game one just became a question of who was able to actually take the advantage. I mean, there was a fire giant dance that lasted, it felt like hours passed as the fights just continued to go on and neither team could continue to find an advantage. It just became a rapid chess battle with pieces going here and there, fights going in all sorts of directions that it was so exciting to watch. The play by each and every player was so good and so perfect at times. It played up to its expectations, even though it did not play out to 3 games, unfortunately for us, for those of us who wanted to watch it. But it was certainly a set that, again, you must go back and watch. It was surprising, the result for sure, Kings Dukes coming out with the 2-0, but that is just an insane game with an insane result. I'll give it off to you, Justin.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I was on the cast for that, and I 100% agree with you. In terms of the game quality, I appreciate, and I know we talked about like maybe our set with the Dragons was uh, a bit closer. Both games I know going about 45 minutes, but in terms of quality of Smite and level of Smite, this was really a set you needed to watch, and I think it really shows the difference as Phenoms and the Dukes have kind of set themselves apart, and now the Dukes have kind of put themselves on another level. Just they understand what their aggression is, how much they can be aggressive, and then why they're being aggressive. And I think that's a big issue with maybe a couple of the teams standing in the middle ground. They be aggressive and then they don't know quite what they're looking for. It seems like a lot of the issues I know. Even you could say the same thing for my team. Sometimes we just fight to fight, and but they were fighting over particular spots, fighting for positioning, and the ward control was immaculate. I know I was rewatching the set, and I see I believe it was Brownside throw a particular ward over a wall around the fire giant pit, and I was just like blown away by the wood placement, even though it seems like it seems a bit minuscule at most. He knew he couldn't take over control of the fire pit, and he just kind of throws it over that little rock where their team would have to enter the fire pit. And you typically never see teams centering that spot because their sentries are right on top of the fire giant. I thought that wood placement was just excellent. So, and I know I'm on the tangent a bit, but it was such a great game, a great cast, and you really I gotta see the Dukes kind of give it to him, and I think a lot of the situations was more so just between a little bit of a draft diff. I think the Phenoms kind of showed a little bit of kink in the armor. I know they have a lot of great players, but it didn't seem like what they brought to the battlefield was just enough to overcome the Dukes that day. And I think with a little bit of cleanup here and there, they could really make it interesting if these two teams find each other again in the playoffs.
Red.
Yeah, oh boy. This is one that I actually am still in the process of watching. I was so enraptured by the first game that I still have not I've not had the time to watch the second game, but it was so good that I didn't even decide to skip through highlights. I'm watching the whole thing through. And so I'm going to defer to you guys on this one cuz that was just
Yeah.
it was such a good game. It was such a good game.
And
Mm-hmm,
just a quick shout out as well. I want to say to just me and Jay, and then everybody on the casting team. I think I said it during this set as well. It's just all the great work that the casters have put into stuff, and I think that's one of the reasons why maybe Red couldn't just skip through the highlights because I think we did a phenomenal job, especially on that set with the cast and everything. And so really just and not I get it. We don't want to toot our own horns too much, but I think it's people like you guys, and I kind of just joined in to help out here and there. That really help carry the Smite community because you don't see too much help coming out of high res and stuff in that particular spot. They really just let people like you guys take control, and you guys are working in countless amount of leagues. I know.
yeah. I appreciate the thought. We you know, the casting team, which does in fact include you now. You know, we work very hard to try and put out a decent product here for QSL. You know, we can consider ourselves some of the best casting, not necessarily top tier, of course, but we try and make sure every game gets casted. One and two that we have good bodies on the field, and you know it's a good thing that you joined here, Justin. Just a tiny aside here as we reach into the minors for the next games, but yes, this was quite the set, both in terms of the actual gameplay and the cast. You definitely brought a lot to the table, Justin. So we thank you for that. And we will now move on to the minors games in review from week 6. We have the Ferrymen versus the Charlotte Fury, which happens to be another set that both me and Justin were in the booth for. So I will give Justin the first foot here since this is my organization's team. Justin, go for it.
Uh, it was definitely a bit of an interesting set. I think this was the first set I got a cast out of the minors, and I was super shocked about how just exciting, how fun the gameplay was, and not a lot of things you get to see in minors, well, in majors, in terms of picks, in terms of bans, how things are prioritized, how things aren't, and I was just really excited to see things like Poseidon come out and things like Athena, which is kind of fallen out of grace, and be very prevalent in that sort of meta down in the minors league. And I believe that was a 2-1 going in favor of
No, it was
no
a
two
2-0 in favor
oh
of the Fury.
Yes, 2-0. Sorry, in favor of the Fury. I'm recalling the Kings game. My apologies, but yeah,
It's okay.
it was just it was a while ago, and I've casted 3 games before, so I apologize. I'm trying to just remember exactly all I saw in there, but
It's
um,
okay.
I believe how close these teams were, and I know the Ferrymen are around the 5th seed now after that game, and well, I would know the 6th seed. It just goes to show how close this area is. Because you see the teams like the Chosen Guans who are in the 7th place seed. You see teams even number 2. That all that could be flipped, and it's really just was super exciting.
Mm-hmm. I tend to agree here. I'll give you the assist here. So, last week they all 3 of those teams, Obsidian Knights, Ferrymen, and Charlotte Fury, were all tied for the 4th place spot. Like that's a whole thing here. Um, just those 3 teams all tied up, and so that just shows, as you said, Justin, how close and clustered all of these teams are. And that becomes in a very important matchup because now the Fury put themselves in a commanding position for playoffs, whereas the Ferrymen, as we'll discuss here after the preview, are in a very rough spot. They have 1 set left to play. It's against the Chosen Guans, and that can make a team. That can be a portion of the reason why the Ferrymen might miss out on playoffs. So that ends up becoming huge, that 2-0. And when it comes to actually drilling into the game, I'll give Red the mic after this, of course. I believe the Charlotte Fury, they played way above what I've seen them play before. Like everything worked out very well for them in that set. When it came to thinking about predictions, I don't predict my teams publicly, but I think the Fury was going to win this game, and I think it just proved too much for the Ferrymen here in terms of just the players in the seats. But it was definitely not a stomp at all, especially game 1. It was very close all in all, and I gotta put it to the Ferrymen because with how their team was, some players are kind of new. They had a recent roster change. Raptor was moved to support. I had my doubts, and some of those players played a lot better than I thought they would. But in the end, the results was still the same here, uh, and that's what comes down to it. This game can prove to be a maker and breaker for Ferryman, unfortunately. Red, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, oh boy. This one here between the Ferryman and the Fury, I I didn't see this one coming, to be quite honest. If I look back at my predictions, I had the Ferryman winning 2-0 on this one. And uh, I I mean and and it kind of kills me because like I know the Ferrymen. I know their roster. I know it from season 2. I know how well that they have been playing, and I've seen individually how well these players have been performing, and something just doesn't feel right. Um, Ever since they let go of Herc, it kind of like they've been trying to find a support, trying to find where everybody kind of fits in their piece and their spot. Um, and it really hasn't been there. But also that being said, um, I have to give as much, if not more, credit to the Fury because the Fury played their game. I mean, they played their game and they refused to play the Ferryman's game. Um, I mean, just thinking about that set in particular, the Ferryman's strength did not come from the individual play, but from the team play that happened later. They took advantageous fights. They were able to push advantages that they had based upon their positioning, as opposed to the Ferrymen, who almost looked hurried or haphazard at times, where sometimes it looked like maybe they were pulling a trigger, maybe they weren't pulling a trigger. There was some sort of commitment, or maybe it wasn't a good commitment. Um, the Fury, on the other hand, had that the mesh, the the stew was melding beautifully as opposed to tasting all the individual ingredients. And I think with the Ferrymen, if you get them into that kind of a fight, I think that's really where the Fury excels and the Ferrymen kind of fall off a little bit right now. And it just showed in this set with the Fury winning 2-0.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I do want to point out that some of those matchups didn't really go in Ferryman's way, and they really have relied on it. For example, Omega really playing strongly.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, Atticus, a first round pick, played extremely well against Omega and made sure that he wasn't able to rotate, make a difference, or to be on the back camps on cooldown. Louis, who's a fantastic player, had to go against Telly, which at this point has been in tier lists. Rest in peace, dearly tier list chat. We will miss you so much.
Nope, not at
Telly
all.
was
Not
I
at
was
all.
being facetious. I was being facetious. It has been a consensus number one in the ADC. Proved a little bit too much. Boy Greatness, who's a fantastic player, playing in, I believe, his fourth best role or second worst role at mid, just wasn't enough against Zero. And so those matchups, in laning phase would eventually result in the victory. Um, in the end, I will give Justen any final thoughts before we move on.
Yeah, as I was remembering this set, and I know I struggled,
It's
but
fine.
actually, I know I wasn't on the cast actually for this one. That's why, because I was in the midst of watching the Boone gang play the Knights, because that was happening during the same time. But yeah, the Ferrymen did a very good job, especially throughout the early game, taking fights. But as Red was talking about earlier, just they seemed a bit rushed throughout that later stages of the game, especially towards those fire giant dances. The game was actually fairly even and honestly a little bit in favor of the Ferrymans, but they just get a bit of rushed. A couple people get picked here or there, and really a lot of that has to do with it is coming later to the season, and they are in that close rat race. As we've alluded to a couple times, and throughout streams, and then even throughout this podcast already. So it just seems like it caught up to them a bit, and they made a little bit too much mistakes. But overall, it was a pretty good set to watch, and the Fury kind of really set themselves apart as just a really strong team fighting team. And once they get out of that once they get out of that early game stage, they can really start to group and combo off each other quite effectively.
Yeah. I literally it just dawned on me as you said that. Yeah, I totally mixed up you and Snatty because Jeering was the same in both sets. So I was like, it was Justin both times. No, it was Snatty. That's it. I apologize. I totally missed the ball on that one. Yeah, it was Snatty Jeering on that cast.
I know I have
Um,
casted a lot of sets these weeks. I think 3 sets in the last 5 days, so I
yeah,
understand the
like my
mistake.
my yeah, my brain, it just happens. But we will finally move on to the next set, the Arc Lords versus the Chosen Guans, and I believe
I was on the cast.
beforehand, yeah, you were on that cast, but I also think Red was talking about how exciting this set was, and so I think I'll give it off to him to start off.
Yeah, so this one, I got to watch the majority of this one, and this was such a good set. This was an absolute knockdown, no holds bar, drag out bar brawl throughout all three of these games, and it was so much fun to watch. Up until game three, where freaking Loki Cyber comes out of nowhere to just rain absolute death upon everyone he touches. But game one and game two were very interesting. You saw sort of the what is a more traditional style come out of Arc Lords, which I wasn't sure how they were going to play it, and yet it didn't look too bad. Even game 2, they did with a more traditional kind of style. Game 3, they did their own thing and just ran roughshod over the Chosen Guans. And I will say it right now, it was mostly Cyber on the Loki. They just let Cyber do what Cyber wanted to do, and it absolutely infuriated me. Because, I'm sorry, someone has to stop that man. Loki mid should not be a thing. Somebody stop that man. Kill that Loki. But to the Archon, or to the Arc Lord's credit, they brought in Kid Slim, who came in as their jungler, and he has looked really, really good as a jungler. Played support in the majors for a little bit, then got traded away or got dropped, and then found a home here in the Arc Lords as a jungler, and has just looked absolutely ridiculously good. And it's probably because of his play style more than anything else. He is a very aggressive support. He was a Horus one trick for a while, but that kind of aggression works so well in the jungle. He is very much a ganking jungler, and it shows. It works. He works well with Cyber. He works well with Honkler. And that entire side of the map is just dangerous to be in. That jungle is so it is such a horrifying place to be if you don't know what's around the corner, because you don't know if Honkler's going to come around the corner, or Slim's going to come around the corner, or if Loki's going to ult you just because Cyber feels like it. So, but I got to give credit. I think it was game 2 that the Chosen Guans took off of the Arc Lords. I think they won game 2.
It was game 1.
Was it game 1? Okay.
Chosen Guans, yeah, Chosen Guans came in and won the first game.
Okay. So but the person I wanted to highlight more than anybody else, to be quite honest, is Amish. The support of the Chosen Guans has been, I swear, from the support role, he has been like, guys, get in the backpack, let's go, we're going to the finish line, we're just going to try and beat the other team there. Ian I showed up for this one as well, and has shown why he was picked up by the Chosen Guans and thrown on the solo lane. He performed very well. But again, my overall props have got to go to Amish. He played lights out, even in the losses. Even in the 2 games that they lost, he played so well in support that I would not be surprised if Amish gets picked up and thrown even into a majors team next season. It wouldn't surprise me at all, just with how well he's played this season.
I tend to agree there. Just fantastic play there by that support. And that team is a lot different than how it used to be. They've dropped a lot of people, picked up a lot of pieces from the draft, from the couple weeks following. That team is very strong now. A strong contender at the moment. And right now, they're definitely playing. Their next game, as we'll highlight, is huge for them because it can make and break their playoff chances. And I would not want to go against that team again if I am my minors team, if I am any other team, because they have a lot of question marks around them that frighten me. Lynn has improved so much since she's been getting coaching from a couple players, just telling her how to build, how to position, when she can take advantages. She's been playing so much better than what I've seen her capable of before. As you said, Amish is fantastic. Dummy Slick is so good in the jungle. A lot of those players, Ian Eyes, as you said, that team is a very, very tough contender. Arc Lords just ended up being a little bit better on that day. The Honkler is such a strong player to have to go up against. But props off to the Chosen Guans for sure for taking a game, because it's super important for their playoff rates. And Arc Lords puts themselves in a strong contending spot to try and maybe pick up that first round bye. but is definitely strongly looking at third and fourth seed for sure coming into playoffs. So just a huge game overall for both teams. Thoughts, Justin?
Yeah, I was on the cast for that set. I was on the cast for that set, and oh, I was another set that was super exciting. My second minors leagues cast, and it was for my minor division team in the Chosen Guans, and I was super excited for them, especially taking game one, as you guys mentioned before. And that was with the sub. They actually brought in Camazotz and had to move Banhook over to the solo lane, who, although did struggle against Honkler for the most part in the laning phase, really kind of shined. And as Red put a spotlight on Amish, I don't really want to do that, but his Ymir play in game one was absolutely fantastic. But if we want to talk about someone, we talked about the Honkler, we've talked about Amish, we've talked about Cyber on this Loki. But another player I think would be well deserving to talk about in this set in particular is Bramble, the 80 carry for the Orc Lords. He had an absolute phenomenal set, a phenomenal game one, even though that happened to be a loss. But he really controlled that duo lane. Really, even once Banhook moved back to his main role, he soloed Banhook a number of times, and he really just showed why he is probably one of the top 80 carries right now in the minors division and why the Orc Lords are sitting at where they are in the playoffs. But as we pivot, enough's been said about how well the Orc Lords have played this season and how close this division is. But when we pivot over and in terms of the playoffs, like you see the Guan sitting out a bit right now, but their next game is against the Ferrymen, and then also I believe they have to play against the Knights, who are both tied for just 1 point above them. So it really is just super exciting um, as we move forward in the weeks, and I I think it's really is just anybody's chance at this point. And the Orc Lords do have a opportunity to take that second place, but also like you were alluding to earlier, Jared, that it's more likely that they will fall in that third or fourth slot. But it's a that's not a bad place to be, you know. That's still playoffs. That's still a chance as they get better and better. And I think if you aren't able to deal with that Loki in the mid lane, just it sucks, but just ban it. Especially with how well Cyber plays that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And before we move on, I do want to highlight that Camazotz is a player I recommended to Lynn to pick up because he played as a sub, an FA sub for my minors league game, and my team told me that they loved him so much. He didn't sadly have a spot for us on our team to pick up, but Lynn needed somebody, and I said, look, pick this guy up, and I love helping out people. So shout out to him. He got to shine on that team and participate in the only game they won in that set. So
Yeah.
good for him. As we pivot to the final game in the review, it's been a long review. Booney Boys versus the Kings Knights, and I will give it to Red because he was talking about it earlier and how this might have been the best set all season that Booney Boys have played.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, so this one here, I'm trying to remember who I was on the cast with.
It was with me.
It was with you. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. It was you and Cooter.
Yep.
And like Bunny Boys and Kings Knights, everybody was expecting the Kings Knights to just 2-0 because they were up there with Little Noms. They were, the Booney Boys had already been eliminated from playoff contention. There was really no there was no significance, that kind of a thing to it.
Yeah.
But when all was said and done, like the Boonie Boys hit their stride. They showed some tenacity. They showed some chutzpah. They came at the King's Knights and took the game from them. It was not a King's Knights going, we're going to troll a little bit. We're not really going to take this one seriously. No, the Boonie Boys came in and took a game from the King's Knights. The number 8 team took a game from the number 2 team and did so in commanding fashion. It was such a good thing to see. And it showed just how close this minor league is. Where the Booney Boys aren't even making the playoffs, but they're going to take on the number 2 team, and they're going to just, you know, they've they're here to kick butt and chew bubblegum, and they ran out of bubblegum. Finally by week 6 they ran out of bubblegum, and they decided to take a game off the Kings Knights and did so amazingly. It wasn't until game 3 where the Kings Knights kind of said, "Okay, this isn't going to happen anymore. We need to we need to really buckle down here and get serious." But even then, that game was really close up until the end. There was not a game where you could truly say the Booney Boys were just completely outclassed. It was such a good game from both of them. I think it's probably one of the best games, one of the best sets that the Booney Boys had shown all season long. I just, I know we get to see them at least 2 more times. We're gonna get to see them in week 7, against the Charlotte Fury, and then if they're not going to make playoffs, but they will have the 7th and 8th place game, and that will be during All Stars week. So we'll see what happens with that, but at least we get to see him play 2 more times, and I want to see him come out swinging even more. Come out aggressive, because it looked so good and so convincing against the Kings Knights. It's such a great game to watch.
Yeah. I, just everything Red pointed at, and just I would agree if you haven't watched this set yet, to if you want to see the Booney Boys just give it to the Knights, you have to watch that set. The whole time though, they're really just making play after play after play, and as soon as you think this team runs out of gas, the Booney Boys are done here. The Knights are about to win. A Giannis dropship takes the game, and it was more than enough excitement. I know. Uh, I'm glad the hot mics got turned off of that one, because at the post game after all mics got cut, it was just we were in disbelief. We were just like, "What is going on?" Croods finally hit his stride. We thought the Knights were gonna run away with it, but then out of nowhere, Jaring Lamb, I believe is the shot caller, just says, "You know what, boys? We've got an opportunity. We've got a window. We're gonna take it here right now." And it was just a nuts end to an overall nuts set. And as he was talking about as well, the Knights cleaned it up, especially in Game 3. They get rid of the Janus. They're not gonna deal with that again. Um, and they just couldn't quite find that magic, but. Really, very unfortunate for the Booney Boys, and you feel for those guys as soon as they get to the end of the season. This is an SPL. Not every team's got a chance to make waves in playoffs, and as soon as you feel like maybe they've got their footing, they really didn't find it early on in the season, so they paid the price for that. But they're not going to make it tough. They do have a couple sets left, and they're not going to make it easy. They're not gonna be kind to people. That's even just taking away that 1 point from the Knights could make an impact in terms of seeding. Maybe they could get dethroned. The Orc Lords are only a point behind them, so they're gonna make people hate having to play them within these next few weeks, thinking, hey, they might go easy on us. They might have some fun. No, the Booney Boys are here to prove something, if not to prove something going on into the next season. So it was super, super exciting. If there was any players you got to mention, Croods did an excellent job throughout the whole set. Cousin Eddie on the support role for the Knights had an amazing set as well. But if I was to pick anybody, it really would have to be probably Rush in that third game. Switching over, didn't seem too comfortable on that carry role. Moves over to mid and is just dominant for the Kings Knights, and just just a really great play out of him in that third game. So I'll go ahead and throw it to you, Jay, if you've got any thoughts about this set.
Yeah, there's not much I can add that you two haven't already said. This is actually a bittersweet set for them, because while Booney Boys, I think, played their best set of the whole damn season, pardon my French, this game, the game that they just played, this set that was their best set probably, is the one that eliminates them officially from playoffs. So that's like, you talk about the hype, all of that. It just all comes down to the flat line that Kings Knights are in it and the Booney Boys will not be in it. Officially, I'm pretty sure this is the first team that we can certainly say is eliminated, from playoff contention. So there is that final bittersweet note there. Um, just to add to it. But on a higher note, the Booney Boys played great, and they still have one more set to go. So, lots to look forward to for them. And finally, we come to the preview. The games to be played this week 7. And the first game up is, of course, or the set rather, is Zeus Juice versus the Reapers. And
Woo!
yeah, this set has huge playoff implications for all of those teams in that sort of middle area. No one's quite sure where they stand. Are they going to be able to get that 4th place? Are they going to be able to maybe slide into that 3rd spot? Maybe they'll slide all the way down to 5th or 6th. Both these teams are highly contested for fighting in the sort of middle ground areas, as we've mentioned so far in this cast. Of it's gritty. There's a lot of stuff for all of these teams here. The middle of the pack to try and prove themselves and make it so that way. Maybe they can try and kick off some of those top teams there, the top 2 or top 3. There's a ton of storylines here too, from Inori and the struggles he's been going through, from Justen's freaking massive mid play in the last game, going like freaking 14-2 or whatever the hell the final stat line was. Um, just insane teams going up against each other. I am going to give Zeus Juice the edge, and I'm pretty sure they are going to go for a pretty clean 2-0. We shall see. I think it kind of depends on if Olive decides he wants to feed or not. But in the end, I have good faith in Zeus Juice. I'm not going to lie. That this
Well,
will end up being a 2-0. Go
well,
ahead, Justin, if you want to talk.
yeah. Before you make your prediction, just to give you an opportunity, unfortunately, a couple situations are going to happen before we play this set, and a little insider information. We're probably going to be having a sub Cuz Toki step in, just in case that changes your mind, for Olive, because he's in the military, of course, and so personal
Mm-hmm.
life comes before Smite, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And so if that's something you want to illustrate on before you make your final predictions, I just want to thought to give you that information because it seemed like you hadn't received that yet.
Well, certainly I hadn't received it, but if I'm gonna take a once over of the Reapers roster and see if that really changes my opinion all that much. Um, not really. Not really. I mean, that also eliminates the Olive feed factor. Honestly, these teams are very close. I just think that it's in super duper close. In terms of what I've seen, both squads come out with. That, I'm not gonna change it simply because I've already put it out there. A stubborn man I am, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
I have faith that Zeus Juice is gonna pull out the win. Definitely. Despite that quick change right there. So yeah, that's where I stand. I don't know if you want to predict your team, Justin, but I'll hand it off to Red first.
Yeah, this one I think if if you would have asked me in like week 4, I think my answer would have been wildly different than what it is now, especially after last week's game. Um I think this one is going to be a lot closer than maybe what the paper kind of says. Um I mean, we're looking at like Poyo going up against Rai, Justen going against Gingy. We're gonna have Reluctance, Justin Hu going up against Inori. Um, so there's a lot of good matchups back and forth. I mean, Juke Boots going up against Margiela is going to be fun too. You know, not to discount Soul in there, but this one here, oh, like on paper, it's telling me one thing. On like just like by the numbers, I'm gonna lean 2-1 to the Reapers, and it may go 2-1 to Zeus Juice, but I still think this set's going 3 games. Either way, I think this set goes 3 games, and I think it's going to be really, 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 really close.
Your thoughts, Justin, if you want to give any of them other
Uh,
than the insight? You don't have to predict, obviously.
I'm not gonna do any predicting. Obviously, a lot of people know my thoughts just because of what I put out week 5, I believe. And obviously my thoughts have changed as I mentioned at the top of the podcast when we talked about the Reapers set against the Phantoms. They are a really great team. And it will be a really fun game to watch. And I think really if we were to highlight anybody going into that set, I think a lot of light has been taken away of how well Morgella's been playing in all the Zeus Juices sets, and then also just how well Inouye played in that last set against the Phantoms. So those are really the 2 players on either ends that I would really want to watch in this set, especially because there is a little bit of a reluctance Inouye rivalry. So that will be another interesting storyline that I can give that one to the casters to go along with. But it will be fun. It'll be interesting. Obviously, I'll be on the ground trying to, I don't know, not be a right in one trick, but I haven't won a single comp match since it's been banned. So maybe I am, and maybe that's why I just live my life in. So
I don't know. That Baba Yaga was a little convincing to me.
Yeah, the Papa Yaga, Jesus Christ. God. That was insane, that gameplay. You couldn't really carry that game harder, buddy. It's unfortunate. But that does reach us to the end of talking about that set. I'm super looking forward to it. Just because I said 2-0 doesn't mean it's not going to be an interesting game. Of course, I can always be wrong. I am human, and humans are prone to error. But we do come to the next matchup. Pittsburgh Phantoms versus Boone Gang. I will give this off to Red Sniper to predict first, as this is my Majors org, so not gonna give any stuff off there.
I mean, this one, in my mind, uh, in my mind, this is going to come down to 2 major fights. And it's going to come down to probably the first, maybe the second Fire Giant, and potentially an engagement around Gold Fury, probably an Oni Fury. Because you're going to see Mark go up against Suboptimal, and you're going to see Stages taking on Castler. And I think Stages outclasses Castler in the mid lane. Stages has just proven time and time again that he is one of the best mid laners. And I don't think Castler is as comfortable in the mid lane. I don't think he's as polished in the mid lane as Stages is. And I think that Kexen is going to be able to disrupt what Castler wants to do. I think Mark and Subkiller that is going to be a fun lane to watch. That is really going to be a fun lane to watch. And then, of course, you've got Drunk Diplomat going up against Duck, and you've got Destiny in support with I'm a Gamer in support for the Phantoms. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting, but I still have to give it 2-0 to the Phantoms. I think the mid, the solo, and I think just those 2 team fights are probably going to go the way of the Phantoms, and I think that's going to tip the game balance in favor of the Phantoms.
Justin?
I might have a bit of a spicier take because Destiny, I believe, came onto this Booney Gang's roster, and they've had a couple role swaps between everybody, and you really don't quite know on paper. Obviously, Crassler's in the mid lane. Stages is going to be up against him. I 100% agree with what Red said. I think Stages has proven to be on another level, and Castler still yet to be proven. But I think a bit more of a better matchup for Stages is if they run a similar kind of lineup that they did against the King's Dukes, where you have Destiny, although Destiny doesn't match up into Stages, but I think it's a lot better of a matchup for the Booney gang than Castle matching up with Stages. And just how young Destiny is, and just how mechanically gifted, maybe just lacks a bit in terms of and situational awareness. But and then also with Drunk Diplomat in the jungle uh, against Kexen could be a very interesting matchup as well. I don't know. I don't know if the matchup between Mark Wings and Subkiller is going to be as close. I know Subkiller has struggled really a lot. But I think he might find his footing against this Phantoms team. But with that being said, I know I said I might have a bit of a spicier take, but before I go into anything else, I do think it's going to be 2-1 in favor of the Phantoms. I think they've kind of found more success, and I think Stages kind of is a floor raiser, if that makes any sense. I think that you look at a roster around him, I think his confidence has given his team confidence and has been playing above at what you might predict their level to be at. And I think that's really has helped this Phantom find success against these teams such as like the Reapers, such as the Mages, more of these middle to lower end teams. They've really been coming out and kind of dominating, even against the Dragons early on, even though now they have NMR. But it will be super interesting to see. I think the Booney gang do actually find a game here, especially uh, up against the uh, up against the Phantoms duo lane. I think Castler and Specify have a bit of a better time, but you never know. Maybe I'm a gamer and Duck kind of just run them down, and then Stages gets to kind of free cast throughout that whole fight. But I do think it will be 2-1 to the Booney gang. I think if Drunk Diplomat and Subkiller can really kind of wrestle control of the game over Quexen and Mark Wings on that solo side of the map, I think could lead to a very interesting set, because I think that could be an incredible dive if utilized and draft correctly.
I'm sorry, was that 2-1
Two
Phantoms or
one to the
2-1 Booney Gang?
Phantoms. Sorry, 2-1
Okay,
to the
okay,
Phantoms. Booney gang, I think, do take a game, but I don't think they win the set.
okay, okay. I was just making sure so that way Red can make note.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, from my perspective, I said last week, what were my words? It was, we're not worried about this set, is what I said about Reapers specifically. Those were the words I said. I try
Hmm.
and choose my words carefully. I am looking forward to the set, is what I will say. Um, as you pointed out, Mark and Subkiller is an interesting matchup for sure. Um, Subkiller being the number one overall pick. I'm very excited to see what he is going to bring in this matchup. I think he is able to match up a little bit better than what he's been facing in the past. Um, in terms of how this team is set up, but as you said, there's a lot of other players in and around that you can note of. SM Specify, another player that FA subbed for the Majors team, played really well in the set against the Phenoms, I believe. And I told Boone, who's the owner of that org, I said, hey, you need a sixth person, that man's your guy, and got him picked up onto that team. So it'll be super exciting to see that guy who once played for our team and also played against our team as an FA sub in a different match, now playing against us again. Always exciting to see people who are familiar with how that team plays. But I think Boone Gang, if they're going to watch out for anything, it's going to be you need to watch the last set that Phantoms played. Because if they play with that kind of map control and they're just allowed to run around as they did, you're going to have a very, very hard set to go through. You cannot let them just run around the map as the support and jungle did in that matchup.
Yeah.
So, just advice, I guess, for Boone Gang. Make my majors boys fight for it, huh?
Yeah.
But we will move on, of course, to the next matchup. We have the Phenoms versus the Archon Dragons. Now, this is quite the matchup. Archon Dragons, seeing as an up and coming team, they have a lot of sets to play,
Yeah.
but they have a an Amar in their roster now. And the rest of their roster is not something to scoff at either. So I'm very interested to see how well Sir NMR, Chair Force Warrior, is going to be able to carry his team or elevate his team, as NMR is known to do. Like you said, with stages elevating the players he's around. I think NMR is a prime example of that, raising people around him. How well is he able to bring the Archon Dragons to what is one of the standard bearers of the majors, the Phenoms? This is a matchup that I'm highly looking forward to just because of how many question marks you see around Archon Dragons. I will give the Phenoms the advantage here, but I think they might drop a crucial game here that might push them into the number 2 spot officially here. And so I will take Phenoms 2-1.
Yeah, I guess it's my time to take over that then. Obviously being the first people that the Dragons, after they acquire Namor, decide to take their reign of terror on. Um, I think this is going to be a very interesting set, and really is going to be a set that the Dragons kind of set the tone with how this new look is for them. Because when you look at it on paper, villain or a half hero, Olea in the mid lane, and Inamara in the mid 3v3, that core, as you would put it, is on paper one of the best, if not as good as the Dukes and the Phenoms' core, and one of the best cores you can really get in this league right now. And as you were putting it, Inamori is a floor raiser, and I think he doesn't get as much, doesn't make as much of the flashy plays as you might like, but he is doing the dirty work that allows Olea to do the flashy plays that he gets to pull off in some of these games. And so because of that, I think this could be a very interesting set with also the Phenoms coming off of a loss. And that's something to really be important. Maybe though, Fortitude has kind of been shaken a bit. Viz really struggled going up against the Dukes and the Bois, and so Olea being notably one of the best mid laners right now, Viz has got a lot of proof going into this set. Also, can Omar bounce back as he kind of got shut down by Drew's food in the last set? So something really important to go. And I will agree with you. I think the Dragons can very well take this set, but I would edge out the Phenoms just slightly. I think the side lanes are just a bit better, can play in the team fights a bit better right now, and I think if they can single out the Dragons in the draft and force Boomhev to be on something that he's not comfortable on, the Phenoms take this. I agree with you. I think the Phenoms take this set 2-1, but I don't think the Dragons or any team that you kind of just push over. I think their core is just too good to really snowball on them in the early game. And if not, they'll be running at your red buff the whole time as they were doing to ours, you know?
Yeah, I gotta. Oh man, this one is so interesting for me because again, the Phenoms are coming off of something that has not happened to them yet this year, which is a loss. Um, and so when you look at what we've seen out of the Archon Dragons, what we've seen out of Olhea and NMR, when we see what they have to go up against in the Phenoms, uh, that there's so many question marks for me, and I guess I'm not quite convinced yet. Um, Especially against a team like the Phenoms caliber. And so I'm gonna go 2-0 to the Phenoms. I think it'll be close, but I think the Phenoms will still manage to pull out 2 games. The Archon Dragons might sneak one, but I still think it'll be 2-0 to the Phenoms.
All right, all right. Excellent predictions all around. Lots of takes here. Of course, we love variety here on the podcast for the QSL. But that does reach us into the pocket of the next matchup, the Kings Dukes and the Obsidian Mages. And I sort of have in my notes here, is this set gonna even happen? Like, Obsidian Mages haven't been really able to play. So I don't even feel giving comfortable a prediction really, unfortunately, because it's kind of hard. I mean, to give storylines, I guess Obsidian Mages won, lost their first round pick after the first week of play. Two, their fourth round pick has been since traded away, dropped into minors. And their second round pick kind of isn't really around. So, what do you do with a team that has struggled all season long? This is an amateur smite league. These things happen. What do you do with a team that doesn't have anybody to play? To man a fort even. Um, and even if this was playable, the Kings Dukes are going to run over any team that has lost their first round pick. That's too much to deal with. In the end, this is a win for the Kings Knights, but I can't even give like a set prediction because I can't even be confident in saying that it's going to happen.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'll hand it
I'm.
off to you, Red.
Oh, this is such a hard game to predict because, again, the amount of turmoil and just absolute uncertainty coming out of the mages, you never know what you're going to get. And because we are playing competitive Smite, because we are playing a game that requires teamwork, and you see that the best teams so far have been ones that have played the teamwork just phenomenally. Um, and because of that particular reason, if the game is played, this is my caveat, if the game is played, I'm going 2-0 to the King's Dukes. I think the Obsidian Mages, I know that they want so hard to win this game. It would definitely catapult them into the playoffs. The Dukes at this point are just kind of playing for the sake of playing. They have a playoff spot wrapped up. There's really no reason for them. I'm trying to think just off the top of my head. I'm not looking at it right now, but um, I don't know if they could drop into the third spot. I think they only could drop into the second at the worst. Um, and so because of that, I mean this game is kind of just a tune up for them as they go into All-Star break, and then we go into the quarterfinals. Um, and even then, they may not play for 2 weeks because they may or 3 weeks even, because of semifinals. So you really never know what's going to happen there. Um, but if this game is played, I'm going to go 2-0 to the Dukes because I just don't see any cohesion coming out of the Mages with who they have right now.
Hey, I agree with Red. If the game is to be played, and I'll put it simply and sweet, this is really just a set for the Kings Dukes to lose if it is played. I don't see an opportunity in which the mages haven't had hasn't had as much opportunity to play with each other, build chemistry. Where the Dukes just came off of a phenomenal set against the Phenoms, so it should just be a 2-0 in the Dukes' favor. Um, but you never know what the majors will bring out, as Red was saying. They do have Warbucks now. Warbucks is a highly touted player. He didn't perform the best, but also he wasn't in the comms when they did play with them. Dragon has shown some promise in the mid lane. Owen Diff has played decently well in the support roles. So really, you can't count this team out, but it is the Kings Dukes set to lose, and I don't really see them losing a game in this set. So it should just be a quick, easy 2-0 for the Dukes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There you have it. For that. As it sort of wraps up the majors there. As we move into the predictions for the minors sets, we first up have the Chosen Guans versus the Ferrymen, which is a crucial matchup for both teams. If the Chosen Guans win, from some of our analysis here, they can clinch into playoffs, at the very least, a 6 seed. This is huge. This is massive for this team, as well as for the Ferrymen, as it could spell disaster for them. It's kind of out of their hands if they get 2-0'd, whether or not they make playoffs or not. Uh, this is a massive game to play for both teams. Ferrymen, who are kind of down on their luck, have a couple roster changes. Chosen Guans, couple roster changes, really, really strong. I expect these teams to really come out swinging. And if we see practice and scrims coming out on the side of the Chosen Guans more than the Ferrymen, I can envision the Chosen Guans actually completing a 2-0 here. And that is what I want to roll with here. As we have noted before in previous podcasts, I am a gambling man. I may favor my friends, but uh, I I think here and now we see a true moment where the Chosen Guans, a member of the Zeus Juice organization, picking up finally something that they really, really need in order to finish off the season the way that they wanted. And the Ferrymen, this is all you got. This is all you got. You have everything to play for here. Because either you play for your destiny, take off a game, or win the set, or you have your destiny handed into the hands of others and say, please, if you can win this game, if you can win this set, we'll still be in the battle. Because other than that, they will be out. And that is a massive mental toll to overcome. So this is a very exciting match for anyone to be watching, for sure. But I am going to take the spiciest take of all time, Chosen Guans 2-0.
Wow,
I
that's spicy.
that is a pretty
Wow.
spicy take. Um, not might not be too spicy just because my take I'm about to give. I know I am a bit biased, and I'll try not to be, but I did watch the Ferryman play. I watched I got to cast the Chosen Guan set, and from what I'm seeing from the both of these teams, it is going to be really, really close. The Chosen Guans have 2 sets left to play. The Ferrymen, this is it. I believe I went back, I looked through, I did a little bit of research for them. I think this is it. And with 1 point separating, honestly, the Chosen Guans have 2 attempts to find their way into playoffs. But if I'm the Guans, I'd rather just straight up take this match. This is all I'm focused on because if they find a 2-0, or even the 2-1, they should either tie or be a point ahead, and technically they would win the tiebreaker with the Ferryman. So this could be very, very a very, very big set for both of them. I think in terms of both of their play, it's going to be a really close set. I think a lot of the responsibility falls back on to Lynn and how well she performs. She's been improving, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast. And I think if she can really get herself comfortable on a character and throughout the set and find the damage that she needs to have, the Chosen Guans have a great opportunity to win. And if the players also are all aligned, Ionized performed amazingly in their last set. We talked about how Omega kind of struggled into Atticus a bit, but it really is going to be a super close set. I don't give the 2-0 here, but I think the Chosen Ones take this 2-1. I think the Ferrymen and the Guans are just too close for this not to go 3 games, and we always hope there to be 3 games just to show how competitive they're, how much of the competitiveness between these minor league teams are, and I think it will come down because I think the Ferrymen are going to be fighting with everything they have to beat the Chosen Guans, and the Chosen Guans also are going to be giving it everything they have as well. So I'll give it 2-1 to the Chosen Guans over the Ferrymen.
Oh boy. All right. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? This is this is really tough because when you look at paper and you look at how things have been played and you see what their last couple of games have been and how they've performed and what they're looking like, I am just beside myself on what to do, because the trend is the Chosen Gons have played well. They've played well time and time and time again. The Ferrymen have kind of fallen apart. They've kind of taken a step back. And so do you go for the team that's hot, or do you go for the team that maybe is solid but is not having the best of times right now? Are they going to be able to bounce back, or is this going to be something to worry about? Oh, this is really tough for me because the numbers are telling me one thing, the paper's telling me something different, and then like my mind is like trying to get the wires uncrossed. But I am going to go 2-1, and I'm going to go 2-1 to the Ferrymen. I say that the Chosen Guans have to play against the Obsidian Knights to try and make it into playoffs. I think the Ferrymen will make it. I think it's going to come down to the Chosen Guan and the Obsidian Knights playing in their makeup game to see who goes to playoffs.
An interesting take indeed.
That's as
All
much
of us.
drama there could be.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Especially if they,
I'm playing for the storyline, man. I'm going for the storyline.
yeah, if the Ferrymen do find the 2-1, that puts them like 2 spots. So that's forces the Guans to have to 2-0 the Knights if they are able to remake that game. So I would be a very, very intense set to watch if that is the case.
Things are coming down to the wire here, folks. There's lots of fun to be had. But with those predictions set, we do move on to the next matchup to predict the Charlotte Fury versus the Booney Boys. I am going to give literally no context. You guys go. Whichever one wants to start.
You want to take this one, Red?
Yeah, I guess I'll do this one. So I actually wrote down these predictions before the show started, and I wrote down 2-0 to the Charlotte Fury, and I think it's going to play that way. The Booney Boys showed great resiliency against the King's Knights, but having talked to a couple of guys, having talked to a few people even on the Charlotte Fury, I know the Charlotte Fury are going to come into this, and they're kind of using this as their tune-up, getting ready for playoffs, making sure that they are ready to go, they are dialed in, because they want to come out swinging. Booney Boys kind of feels a little off, maybe a little bit, a little behind, so to speak, and I kind of see this one going pretty squarely in favor of the Charlotte Fury.
Yeah, I guess I'll take it over now. It's really going to be a case of if Lightning can kind of strike twice for the Booney Boys and how well they can play it and maybe show some consistency, because we talked about how great they played, and Joe talked about how that was probably the best set they've ever played earlier on. And if the Booney Boys can kind of keep that consistency going, the Fury could be in a bit of trouble. I think they're pretty set and secured for the playoff spot, but they could definitely shake up seedings. I would give it to the Fury in this set as a 2-0. I don't know if the Booney Boys are going to be able to find that consistency in this set, especially after the Fury just dealt with the Ferryman in the fashion that they did. And I think the Knights kind of had a bit of an off night. I think a couple of them struggled in that set that typically you don't see from the Knights. So I really think the Fury take this one pretty handedly, 2-0. I expect the Booney Boys, they have nothing else to lose, so they definitely could shake it up. They definitely could catch them with some cheese and maybe have a little bit of fun with it, and might catch the Fury with their pants down. But I don't see that really happening, so I will give it to the Fury 2-0.
These are the words I will use, and I use my words carefully. Good luck, casters, for this set. That's all I want to say. That's all I want to say. So
I
we will move
swear,
on
if
to
the
the next.
Fury troll us all, I'm blaming you, Jerry. I'm blaming you if they troll us.
Not my call, buddy. But um, next up, the matchup: Lil Noms versus the Arkham Lords here. This is actually a pretty decent like big matchup here, right?
Mhm.
Like we have um what could be maybe the only opportunity left for the Little Noms to really have a contest rather for their their undefeatedness. They've dropped what one set, and it was not one set, one game, and it was only because of them being late.
Yeah, they dropped
Yeah.
one game to the Chosen Guans, and it's because they showed up 15
Yes,
minutes late to the game.
yes. So they haven't actually been defeated in an actual set, and this is week 7 that we're talking about. So Arc Lords have a lot of good pieces in a lot of different places. So do the Little Noms, of course. My question going into this set is, how well does this all play through? Because the Little Noms right now, they're in the playoffs for sure. But the very big question is, will they have the seeding that they want? And will they go undefeated in actual games against any opponent? And this might be the best opportunity. I know that they actually have still 2 sets that they need to play a rematch, or reschedule rather. But the Arc Lords are a very strong team. They have a lot of good pieces, and so this is a huge matchup for both squads. Arkham Lords still playing for great seeding, especially against the King's Knights, but the Little Noms possibly playing for that almost perfect season. So, with that said, I will still give the advantage to the Little Noms, but I think the Arkham Lords will give them the battle that they really need, especially as we reach in to the final weeks of the season. Little Noms 2-1.
Oh, I'll take over now because I threw it to Red last time, so I'm not put him on
Go
the
right
spot
ahead.
again. But the Little Noms have just been super dominant all season, and I do know a couple of those players on that roster with Josh the Landlord and Janice, as I'll put it. Um, they have been a really strong duo, and one of the big reasons the amount of pressure the Little Noms roster puts out. And as you were talking about, this could be their last chance to really play, to really get a punch in the mouth heading into playoffs. Um, and if this is the time that the Orcloids take a game or even a set, not saying that they will, but it would be this time right now just so the Noms could recognize maybe a couple of holes in their game and fix it before coming into playoffs. But I expect the Noms to come out and really make an example of the Orcloids coming up this week. Really say, yes, we are the team to beat. Yes, we are the 1 seed, and yes, it's not even close. And I think they'll come out with a pretty strong 2-0 victory, especially with how much the Orcloids did struggle with the chosen Guans and the set prior. Last week they did still find the win, but I think that just the little Noms on another level, and I really think they take a clean 2-0 victory here. And maybe a little bit of pushback coming out of the Orcloids, but I really think the Noms are just really set and poised to make a huge playoff run.
I'm going to slightly agree with both of you. I think the Little Noms do come out of this one with a victory. However, I think it's going to be a lot closer um, than what people would expect. I think the Chosen Guans are a team to take seriously. And because of that, I think that the Arc Lords, with their 2-1 victory, I still think that they are absolutely a team that is striving for that semifinals bye. Um, and I think that Little Noms still take this one, but I think it's going to be 2-1 Little Noms. I think the Arc Lords take a game. I think they take one. I think it's going to be close. And I think maybe game 3 might be the most lopsided because I think the Little Noms are kind of like, okay, we don't want to drop a set. We want to have a perfect season kind of thing. But we'll see how that works out, as I think the Arc Lords do come out swinging. However, I don't know if they're going to have Cyber for this one, which will hurt their chances a lot. And so if it's full roster and full roster, I think 2-1. If Cyber doesn't show up, I think it might still be, I think it might be 2-0 to the Little Noms. We'll see what happens though.
Yeah, with that roster change for Cyber is such a great player. So that would really hurt them in that matchup for sure, which could determine a lot of fates for their teams. I think both teams are locked into playoffs, but for Arc Lords, that could hurt them in the standings in terms of seeding going forward. But with that said, we do reach into the last matchup here, which is the Battle of the Knights. We have King's Knights versus the Obsidian Knights, which is a fun matchup for sure. And the thing is that for one team, this is crucially important. For the Obsidian Knights, depending on the results of other sets, this could decide them being in the playoffs versus being out of them. So this can be very massive depending on the results of other sets
Yeah.
that we've already talked about.
And I would like to
So,
point out, I apologize. I'd like to point
go
out
for it.
before we go into predictions, if it's true and we see a little bit of drama coming out and the Ferrymen take care of the chosen Guans and maybe the Obsidian Knights fall to the other knights, the King's Court, uh that rematch between the chosen Guans and the Obsidian Knights is money on the line. You win, you make playoffs. You lose, you don't. You go home, and that could be something that could be very, very exciting if that future plays out.
Exactly. As Justin was saying, there's a lot to ride on this particular game because it can lead to other games being even more exciting. But this game alone, if the Obsidian Knights drop everything and lose it all to the King's Knights, which is surely in the cards here, depending on how the Ferrymen and the Chosen Guans shake out, they could be on the outside, looking in, going, where did it all go wrong? They have a couple other things pending, of course. The Obsidian Knights still have to finish the one game carryover to finish the set with Charlotte Fury, I know. I think that's the only other outstanding thing that they might have. They do have that set, as you were talking about, outside of this King's Knights with the Chosen Ones.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a lot to play for here. There's still a lot to play for here because it's gonna be real hard to come back from a loss here. And the King's Knights really, they they only have this left. This is basically their tune-up before playoffs. So these are two very different kinds of ways of looking at a set coming in. So, with that said, I still think the King's Knights are a super good team. Their mental is phenomenal. They play well together. If all of the members are there, the starting roster, I'm pretty sure the King's Knights will, in fact, take that 2-0 and force the Obsidian Knights into a position uncomfortable and out of their control, such that they might even miss out on the playoffs.
Hmm.
I will give it over to Justin to continue.
Yeah, in terms of matchups, we get to see our very own Chaos tonight going up against the Zombie Crusher and how well he's played. And I believe one of his top picks is that X Ball, so that's something that Zombie Crusher could use to really shut down that dual lane. And then also, I pointed out earlier how Rush plays super well, so it's going to be interesting to see how Peaceful can keep up with him in that mid lane. But I would agree with you. I think the Kings Knights, and we've been saying this about a lot of the top teams, are really going to try to utilize this opportunity to ramp up into playoffs. And even though the Obsidian Knights that would be have a lot to play and a lot riding on this game, and they really would like to find either a set win or if not a game, bare minimum. The Knights also have well, the King's Court Knights have a lot of play for as well, because the Orc Lords are very, very close, and depending on how that set with the little noms go, the King Court's Knights could fall out of that second seeding and lose their chance to really choose their own fate in that playoff bracket alongside of the little noms. So I think they come out and they take this set very, very seriously. And if the King's Knights do come out and take that set very, very seriously, I think we do see a 2-0 for the King Court Knights over the Obsidian Knights, and that makes it even more exciting because then the Obsidian Knights have their season on the line with maybe a couple remakes. That one game with the Fury, and then the set with the Chosen Guans yet to be played.
Yeah. Oh man, this one here. Oh, I have. Mm, I have such a. I am in two minds about this one because there's a little bit of. Let Let's just say I have heard a little rumbling that Zombie Crusher may not exactly be happy and he may not play in this set. And because of that, I think this set is going to be very, very close. Um, Even with Uncle Fable coming in, which I'm expecting with Cousin Eddie coming in, and Cousin Eddie is phenomenal. Um, if I had to have a sub, Cousin Eddie is a great sub. That being said, it's going to come down to really two, maybe three matchups. I think the jungle is going to be critical between Crudes and Goody Proctor. I think the mid between Peaceful and Rush, and I think the solo lane between Enraged Moose and Achilles. I think those are the three main matchups. Um, Depending on what happens in the carry lane, Chaos likes playing that Artemis. If he gets his hands on that, could be very, very good. If they ban it out, we'll see what he's able to do on someone else. I don't think he's quite as up to it when he plays something like an Izanami or something like that. I don't think that's quite his favorite. I don't think he's as comfortable. But that being said, I think the King's Court Knights take this one 2-1. I I think the Obsidian Knights do take a game away from the King's Knights, but I still think the King's Knights take the set.
Interesting stuff. I mean, that little point right there could mean a whole lot to the Obsidian Knights for sure in terms of their standing. So there's still a lot to play for. The King's Knights aren't exactly invincible, but they are a very strong team, and so we will see how that all shakes out. But that does end our preview of the next week, and so we reach into the bag of the playoff viewpoint so far. And for the mages, not the mages, the majors, sorry, um, just two similar words. Um, it's a little bit unclear because they sort of skipped out on week 3, as we've talked about before. There's a couple teams that have a lot more sets that they need to actually finish, so we can't give definitive answers on a lot of things. However, I'm pretty sure that the top 3 teams at this point are impossible to miss playoffs. The Kings, Dukes, and Phenoms and Phantoms, I'm sure the Archon Dragons kind of put a wrench into this, given how many sets they still actually have to finish. I'm pretty sure that those three teams have locked in the playoffs, and the rest of the teams are still very much playing for whether or not they can get in. Correct me if I'm wrong, Red, here, but that's sort of the outlook, is that definitely the top three teams, if not so, with the Archon Dragons, the top two teams have locked in playoffs, not necessarily seeding. Well, the rest of the teams are playing for seeding and possible playoff eligibility.
Yeah. Hang on 1 second. Let me get this in. So taking a look at how everything kind of is panning out here. So the Kings Dukes are currently sitting in first with 15 points. The Phenoms have 12. The Phantoms have 10. Those are your top three. There's really no one that can dislodge them from those positions. The closest you could get to that would be the Reapers in fourth place. They have 7 points currently. They have 2 games to play. They have to, but when you're looking at what games they have left to play, the Kings Dukes have to play. Sorry, no, I take that back. They played that week 3 game. The Phenoms have to play the Obsidian Mages, and the let's see, Boone Gang has to play Phenom. Or sorry, I'm all messed up in my scheduling here. Give me 1 second.
That's okay.
Zeus Juice has to play Pittsburgh Phantoms. Boone Gang has to play Archon Dragons. Kings Dukes has to play Archon Dragons. And
Dragons have to play the Reapers and the Mages as well, so they have a lot of sets to play.
Yeah, so again, that the Archon Dragons are kind of the monkey wrench that's getting thrown into all of this, because depending on how they play, and if they play as well as they played against Zeus Juice, I see them beating the Mages, beating Boone Gang, beating the Reapers. They could definitely give a fight to the Phantoms, I think, which
That
could
set has already been
change.
played.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yep.
That set has already been played, but I still think that they could still throw a gigantic monkey wrench in all of this. But as you said, there is no possible way that the Kings Dukes, the Phenoms, or the Phantoms do not make playoffs at this point. The Reapers, depending on what happens with the Dragons, they've probably made playoffs, but they could fall as far as 6th. Zeus Juice is kind of the same. They've pretty much made playoffs, but they could fall to 6th depending on how their final games go. Really, it's going to come down to the Boone Gang, the Archon Dragons, and the Obsidian Mages. Out of those 3, what 2 are not going to make it? Do the Archon Dragons, are they able to win all their games and, magically pop into that 5th or even 4th spot? Whereas, does that force Boone Gang then down into the 7th seed, or does that force Zeus Juice down to the 7th seed? That's kind of where the mystery happens. I will say, though, that is probably the tightest grouping, because Obsidian Mages still have to play 3 games, Archon Dragons still have to play 5, everybody else still has to play 2. But no one has been mathematically eliminated from the playoffs as of right now. As of recording, which is 8/23, August 23, nobody in the majors has been mathematically eliminated from playoffs. Is it unlikely for the Mages to make it? Yes. Is it unlikely for the Dragons or the Boone Gang to make it? Yes. But nobody's been mathematically eliminated yet.
It's also very unlikely that the Dukes would entirely fall off.
I think the
Yeah.
Dukes have solidified their spot. I know a couple of them, just looking at the math, like the Dukes, the Phenoms, and the Phantoms are set. Especially they can't not make playoffs, but also the Mages aren't eliminated. But really, that's I didn't really think about it being that close, but yeah, the Reapers, Juice, us, the Dragons, Boonigang, Mages, all of them still fighting for playoff spots. And I know a couple sets are harder than others, but it's still a possibility.
Yeah.
There's a ton to still play with in the majors, and that's sort of the fun as we reach into to see if the Archon Dragons can really schedule 5 games in these last 2 weeks.
2 weeks. 2
Because certainly
weeks.
many of them, yeah,
You
2 weeks.
You
So
reckon, Joe, you reckon they get a couple of those sets, like 2 or 3 of them try to scheduled, and then, like, they make playoffs, and then they're just like, "You know what? We're good to give the FF over," depending on the rosters they have to play against just because?
I mean,
Or
I think it's who do they want to play? Because
yeah,
remember, I mean, they've already lost to the Phantoms, but do they really want to play Kings Dukes or do they just FF that set because it doesn't matter anyways? The Kings Dukes are gonna take first place.
yeah,
Um, the week 3 reschedule was against Booney Gang. Do they pick that one up because that could force Booney Gang into 7th place? They make playoffs over them. Do the Archon Dragons play the Obsidian Mages? The Obsidian Mages are in 8th place. They're so far back, but again, if the Archon Dragons can't get it scheduled because that was their reschedule, they FF that one, and then do the Obsidian Mages gain the 3 points, and now are they back in contention?
yeah.
All of this stuff is thrown high into the air, and you're looking to see what spaghetti sticks to the wall right now. That's kind of what's happening in the majors.
I think
yes,
it's I think it's very important for the Dragons to definitely get those sets in Booney Gang Mages just to prioritize that because if they let's say they take the sets and they don't quite have enough time to get all their games played, but they just unfortunately take like Dukes and Phenoms and out of those two and the Repos instead of just focusing on Boonigang and Mages. The Boonigang and Mages then get those points, and if they somehow falter, if they lose those sets, they could still find themselves out of playoffs. So I think really getting those games against Boonigang and Mages, people they're directly kind of competing with for that slot, is going to be top priority for that team to at least just deny them the points.
Yeah, so I'm looking at all of the rescheduled games right now that have to be played as of week 6. So we have the Archon Dragons have to play the King's Dukes, they have to play Booney Gang, they have to play Obsidian Mages, they have to play the Reapers. Those are their 5. So King's Dukes, Booney Gang, Obsidian Mages, Reapers. Sorry, that's 4, and then they have their week 7 matchup coming up. Um, the Phantoms still have to play Zeus Juice. The let's see, that's minors. We'll talk about that later. Oh, and Obsidian Mages have to play Phenoms. So those are the games that are to be played. Those are the reschedules. Um, Out of those games, I think the most critical ones are Phantom versus Zeus Juice, Dragons versus Booney Gang, Dragons versus Mages, and Dragons versus Reapers. If those can at least get played, I think we have a very, very good picture of what the playoffs are going to be.
Yep, I agree with you.
yes, yeah. It's a very complicated situation, everyone. To those who are listening, but
Yeah.
there's a lot in flux, but we're pretty sure like the end all be all is that the top 3 are definitely in playoffs, and the rest of them are definitely fighting for playoff contention, seeding, and even the top 3 are still fighting for seeding in certain regards. So
Mhm.
that's where the majors sit. And so now we will move on to the minors, which is much more clear cut at this moment.
Yeah.
So Lil Noms stand as the standard bearer. They've only dropped 1 game from a rule. They've won every single set. They are pretty much gonna be at number 1. We've already talked about they still have to play Arc Lords, and that could give them a run for their money. Just in terms of maybe them dropping a game. But I think at this point we can probably say Lil Noms is in. They're not mathematically out completely in that number one spot, but they're definitely in the driver's seat for this season. And the Kings Knights, everything rides on this last game. This last game can determine for them whether or not they might be able to leapfrog Lil Noms, whether they stay at the number two, or they fall all the way, possibly, to I believe the lowest they can go, given that their matchups where they're at is number four. So they still have a lot to play for here. Because in the 1-to-1 matchup against Charlotte Fury, they lost that set. And Arc Lords can leapfrog them in terms of points. So that's where I'm heading through, mathematically speaking, because the Charlotte Fury here, they sit at 10 points. The Arc Lords sit at 12. The Charlotte Fury, if they win this last set, they get 3 points. They win that tiebreaker against the King's Knights because they won that set. And that puts the Charlotte Fury in an excellent position if the Arc Lords manage to not pull out a set victory into that number 2 spot. So a lot of storylines at the top of the list there. But all those teams I was mentioning are decently locked in
Yeah.
into the playoffs. Everyone who's really above 10 points is really sitting in at a playoff spot. The Obsidian Knights, they still have a lot of stuff that they got to play that could prove to be an issue with the standings. But I think that they, depending on the results of some stuff, there's still a couple question marks, as we highlighted in the previews and the reviews, as well as the Ferrymen and the Chosen Guans. They're really fighting in those last spots there to figure out who can make playoffs and who cannot, as the Boone Boys, as we already said, have been completely eliminated from playoff contention. And with that said, I'll hand it over to my friend Red to discuss.
Yeah, so Little Nom's sitting at 15, King's Knights at 13, Arc Lords at 12, and Charlotte Fury at 10. They're kind of set into playoffs. There's a little bit of wiggle room as to what their seeds might be, but almost all of them are a lock for playoffs at this point. The real jeopardy comes between the Obsidian Knights, the Ferrymen, and the Chosen Guans, and the biggest problem between the three of them is the Chosen Guans still have to play both the Ferrymen and the Obsidian Knights. Those are huge, huge games. It's essentially a round robin best of 3. Obsidian Knights have already beat the Ferrymen. That's the reason why they are listed technically in the 5th overall spot, and the Ferrymen are in the 6th overall spot. So for playoff seeding, that's how it would operate. But if the Chosen Guans pull off a win, they're in. If the Ferrymen pull off a win, they're in. If the Obsidian Knights end up dropping everything, they could be out at this point. I mean, all of this stuff plays into a small amount of chaos because it's only 3 teams. It's not like it's the majors where you have the Archon Dragons having to play 3/4 of their season in 2 weeks. But you have the Chosen Guans, the Ferrymen, and the Obsidian Knights in this. I know back when the Ferrymen and the Obsidian Knights were playing each other, they called it the Lover's Quarrel. Well, now we're in the Lover's Triangle, and we're trying to figure out who the couple is going to be and who's going to be the third wheel or the odd man out. And week 7 kind of reveals all.
Yeah, week 7 is going to be a very important week for those bottom, well, not the bottom 3, but the Obsidian Knights, Ferrymen, and Chosen Guans. Really, it could set up a lot of drama coming into that All-Star break, especially because I'm assuming that's when a lot of those rescheduled games are going to try to be scheduled. And it could very well just come down to Knights and Guans, as we were talking about earlier, or even the Ferrymen just missing out on their last game opportunity, and the Guans and Knights just holding their opportunity above them. It's going to be really, really interesting. with the Knights still have a couple sets to play. The Guans have a couple sets to play. One of those sets being head to head against each other, and then the Ferrymen only having one set to play. You feel bad for the Ferrymen because you would, if you were on that team, you would want, like, well, if they got two sets to play, I would want at least two opportunities. And once they get that week 7 game out of their hands, it's really up to how the Knights and the Guans decide to perform, and it could very well be out of their hands. They could even win the set 2-1, 2-0, and still somehow find their way missing playoffs. So it's going to be really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Um, I mean, it's kind of a heartbreak thing for the Booney Boys because they've just finally hit their stride at the end of the season, and they're already going to be playing during All-Star Week. We've already confirmed that. Um, but we need to see who their opponent's going to be, and how all the seating is going to be worked out. We do have week 8, which is kind of that makeup / catch-all week, right before the All-Star break, and I'm looking forward to a lot of Smite being played in the next couple of days.
My voice is not looking forward to it.
I'm with you on that one. I'm completely with you on that one.
Oh yeah. There's plenty of Smite to be played in the Kraken Smite League as we reach to the end of this podcast. If there are any parting thoughts from you guys, you may send them forth. As I say, since we are talking about All Stars here, please, to anyone who is still listening, vote in All Stars if you haven't already. There are, I believe, at maximum about 40 votes so far in either majors or minors. This is crucial for those who will play in the All-Star game and those who will not. Choose your the best and the brightest, your favorites, possibly a player that you play with a lot. It really does not matter. Just exercise your right to vote. The voting actually ends in 4 days. Saturday the 28th of August is when voting is closed and the All-Stars will be decided. So please do that. If anything you get out of the podcast, this parting note here. But I will leave it to you guys. Say your piece before we end it here.
Yeah. Well, as Jared was mentioning with the All Stars voting, I get to use my opportunity. My birthday is on Friday the 27th. So if you want to make me a very happy birthday boy, get those votes in and click the little Zeus Juice mid laner right there. And I can assure you that Raijin will get banned in both sets.
I am just glad that there was no optional category for like a write-in vote where, like, throw in your favorite mod to see him just get pounded on by all of these all-stars. I mean,
Oh.
because I am almost assured that my name would be up there. My name and Skeet's name would definitely be on there just to watch us get absolutely hammered by like Olhea or Duck or Stages or something like that. Just getting picked off by NMR out of the jungle every 30 seconds because he can. I am glad for that. But at the same time, I'm kind of interested. This is maybe just my sadistic side. I wonder what the people would think if we did a mods versus casters game and have it casted by some all stars. Um,
That would
you
be
know,
exciting.
just throw a little nugget out there. Let us know in the feedback channel. Let us know, either you can DM one of us, but let us know if you're interested in having a casters versus mods game. And also, because there's 3 of us here, maybe we can do a casters or either a casters or a mods versus podcast joust. Maybe that would be interesting too. Do like a best of 3 joust or something. But yeah, give us your ideas. Let us hear what you guys want to see during All-Star Week, in addition to the duck soups that we're gonna have. But yeah, that's all I'm gonna say for this week's podcast. Wow, it's been a long one, but thank you guys for sticking to the end with us. We appreciate every single view or every single view on YouTube and every single listen on Spotify. Thank you guys so much for all of your interaction as well.
Thank you.
And I think with that, we are going to call it a good evening, everyone. Bye,
There we
everybody.
go.
Bye.
Yep, see ya.